the only thing that I have left of my dad.
Lily Speedney-Mox is holding both this necklace containing her father's ashes and cherished memories close to her heart.
His smile. It was contagious. He could make anybody smile, anybody laugh.
As she processes a major development in the investigation into his death. Charges of manslaughter against 2 officers and obstruction of justice against 3 others who are accused of telling witnesses to delete any cell phone video.
It's an uneasy feeling to know that the people who, in my eyes, murdered my dad are still working and having their jobs and spending time with their family.
According to Prince George RCMP, 4 officers remain on duty and 1 is on administrative leave for reasons unrelated to this incident. 35-year-old Dale Culver of both Gitxsan and Wet'suwet'en nations encountered police in July of 2017 following reports of a man casing vehicles. Culver tried to get away, but after a brief struggle, pepper spray was used. The father of 3 struggled to breathe and later died.
There's no way that this process should take this long.
Charges were recommended by the province's police watchdog in 2020.
First Nations have known for a long time that we are subject to racism and egregious behavior by police services across Canada.
Why it took so long for charges to be laid is a key question for Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief Terry Teegee, who's demanding quicker action to resolve other ongoing cases.
A relative of mine, Ever Patrick, who died in custody, and many other cases, Jared Loudness in Campbell River, another Wet'suwet'en man. So certainly many cases out there that are still outstanding.
And as for why those officers who've been charged in Culver's death are still on duty, the RCMP hasn't made that clear. Speedney-Mox says the charges being laid feels like a reassuring step in the right direction.
It's definitely a lot for my whole family.
However, with the trial set to begin March 14th, it's also the beginning of another long and difficult process for the family. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
Dale Culver was 35 years old, a father of 3, when he died in the custody of Prince George RCMP in 2017.
I will never get to make any more memories with him.
This is a photo of Lily Speedney-Mox as a child with her father. She says waiting more than 5 years to see charges laid has been painful.
If the RCMP and my dad had switched roles, my dad would it wouldn't have gone this way. There's no way it would have taken this long.
2 officers have been charged with manslaughter and 3 with attempted obstruction of justice. Over the years, protests have been held demanding answers and accountability. The police watchdog recommended the Crown consider charges in 2020. He blames a shortage of investigators for the delay.
I feel awful about it. That's why I don't sleep at nights. But it's not just this file, it's other files.
4 of the officers charged remain on active duty in Prince George. 1 is on administrative leave for other reasons.
If I were to have any kind of situation happen like that, I can tell you I probably wouldn't want to contact the RCMP.
Adding to this is the death of her uncle, Everett Patrick, following an arrest in 2020. The IIO is also asking Crown to consider charges in that case as well.
I think that there needs to be a seismic shift in the attitudes of police in Canada and certainly in British Columbia with respect to their absolute disrespect for people of color, Black people, Indigenous people.
Still grieving, Speedney-Mox keeps her father close to her heart. His ashes held in this necklace.
So that he can still see me and my siblings get older and be with us every day.
The officers charged in his death will appear in court March 14th. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
The family of Dale Culver and supporters gathered outside of Prince George Courthouse yesterday. They've been waiting for nearly 6 years for answers after Culver, a Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan, 35-year-old father of 3, died during arrest by RCMP officers in Prince George in 2017. The 5 officers who are facing charges concerning his death were to appear in court, but the case is now delayed more than 2 months. Lily Speedney-Mox, Dale Culver's daughter, stated even though the case is delayed, they are not going to stop seeking justice.
I had to show our support today and show that even though they might have moved the date, we're not going to stop, we're not going to move. This is still my dad's case. That was my dad's life that got taken away, and that means the world to us.
Virginia Pierre raised Dale Culver. She said after he died, it took 72 hours until they were notified by RCMP. Earlier in the week, the family held a press conference calling for systemic changes. She expressed frustration with the amount of time it's taken to find answers.
72 hours before we found out he's gone. Now we're waiting over 6 years. And then all of a sudden, nothing is happening tomorrow. There's something wrong here.
Last month, the Crown charged 2 RCMP officers with manslaughter in Dale Culver's death. 3 RCMP officers are facing obstruction of justice charges. The court date is now moved to May 2nd. Debbie Pierre was having doubts officers would face charges. Last month, she was relieved to find out the Crown was moving ahead with charges.
I honestly felt it was not going to proceed because this has happened across Canada for how many generations now with no justice. And it gives me hope, but it also with much uncertainty.
In an email statement to APTN News, BC RCMP also expressed concerns about the lengthy process and stated the officers remain on duty. The BC RCMP fully cooperated with the IOBC during the investigation and fully supports independent investigations and judicial reviews of police-involved incidents as required. We do have concerns regarding the nearly 6-year timeline in this instance though, as it puts undue stress on the man's family and our members and their families in the community, which has been looking for clarity and answers on what occurred. The members are operational, and their duty status is subject to continuous assessment. The Assembly of First Nations BC Regional Chief Terry Teegee called for changes along with the family. His family member Everett Patrick, a 42-year-old father from the Lake Babine Nation, died after suffering a serious injury in the Prince George detachment in 2020. Last year, the police watchdog asked the Crown to consider charges against one officer. Chief Teegee stated that inquiries need to be upheld in changes across Canada to address racism against Indigenous people.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the National Action Plan on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, the true and full implementation of Bill C-15, the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, provincially C-41, the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, need to be fully implemented to combat racism, to combat the view of Indigenous peoples.
Lily Speed Amox wants an apology from the officers involved in her father's tragic death. She stated it is unfair that the officers are on active duty. For the past 6 years, she's worked through her grief and has become a powerful advocate for changes in policing.
I refuse to let my dad's death be forgotten about without some kind of change, and to just be subjected to a number on a case file. And he was my dad and the dad of my 2 younger siblings, and that needs to be known, that he was a person. He wasn't an item or a piece of paper. He was a person just like you or I. He deserved to live.
The family remains determined to find answers to what happened to Dale Culver. Leah Wilson, APTN National News, Prince George.
2 Prince George RCMP officers who had been previously charged with manslaughter with the death of Dale Culver had their charges stayed.
Story tonight, the RCMP officers who were charged with manslaughter against Dale Culver had their charges dropped today in court.
It was announced on Friday that 2 Prince George RCMP officers who had been previously charged with manslaughter with the death of Dale Culver had their charges stayed. First Nation leaders in the province are outraged. The family have been calling for changes in the justice system for years. APTN's Lee Wilson reports.
The family of Dale Culver, a father from the Wet'suwet'en and Gitxsan nations, have spent almost 7 years calling for justice, following his death during an arrest in Prince George in 2017. Debbie Pierre is Culver's cousin and explained the heartbreaking process the family has been going through, dealing with levels of the justice system to find answers.
Ensuring that Dale does not become just a file number or a case number. He's an individual that is deeply loved by many people, and we cannot lose sight of that.
In 2023, the BC Prosecution Service charged 2 RCMP officers with manslaughter, Constables Paul St. Marie and Jean-Francis Monet, as well as 3 obstruction of justice charges against Sergeant John Eusebio Cruz, Constables Arthur Dahlman, and Clarence McDonald. Following recommendations from a police oversight body, the Independent Investigations Office, who recommended charges in 2020. Last week, the family was hopeful, but frustrated with the delays and lack of clarity.
Our family has no trust right now in policing, and it pains me to know that my immediate family that live in Prince George, where this incident happened, they are looking over their shoulders. How is that safety in Canada?
On Friday, the BC Prosecution Service announced a stay of the court proceedings on the death of Culver in a public statement. The BC Prosecution Service announced today that there is no longer a reasonable prospect of conviction regarding charges that have previously been approved against 2 members of the Prince George RCMP. The document states the Crown had questions about Culver's cause of death. An initial pathologist who recommended blunt force head trauma contributed to his death. A second pathologist disagreed with the initial assessment, determined the cause of death, acute and chronic effects of methamphetamine following a struggle. In a press release, the BC First Nation Leadership Council expressed outrage over the charges being stayed, calling it categorically unacceptable. Once again, the justice system has let First Nations people down as it fails to move this case forward to trial, and I question the ability of the current system to deliver justice in a fair and equitable manner. We will continue to follow this developing story. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
Good evening, I'm Eddie Huband, and welcome to CKPG News. Our top story tonight, the RCMP officers who were charged with manslaughter against Dale Culver had their charges dropped today in court. Constables Paul St. Marie and Jean-Francois Manette received these charges last year in the case regarding Dale Culver, a man who died 7 years ago following a physical altercation with police. Tommy Osborne spoke to Culver's family following the court session, who say they are appalled that the charges were dropped. Here's tonight's top story.
To call our system a justice system is not true, because otherwise we wouldn't be standing here with no justice today.
That was the feeling of around 100 people who attended a rally outside the courthouse and the following court session regarding the 2 officers charged with manslaughter against Dale Culver, as a stay of proceedings was ruled by the Crown for Constables Paul St. Marie and Jean-Francois Manette.
When you have RCMP members stepping in and doing atrocious acts such as this, how could they call that justice? How could they call this country a free and just country?
After analyzing forensic data files, the Crown said it couldn't be proven that RCMP caused Culver's death. While one forensic pathologist reported that the physical altercation with police resulted in brain injury, the Crown also got a second report from what it called Canada's top forensic pathologist, which disagreed with the original. The second report said Culver's death was caused by a heart attack due to the acute and chronic effects of methamphetamine use, and while the physical altercation exacerbated Culver's ensuing heart attack, the Crown ruled it could not be proven that the officers dealt any fatal injuries or directly caused Culver's death.
What has happened here is tragic, but one wouldn't have thought that a component of the system would have got this that wrong. As the Crown said, there were no fatal injuries caused by the police. And that's the end of it.
When we hear that a pathologist's report is no longer credible in this court system, there's something very flawed about our judicial system.
There is no reason or doubt in my mind that it is still those RCMP's fault that he is dead, because without that given interaction that night, he would still be here today.
As for the RCMP officers whose charges have been stayed, the National Police Federation says it's happy to close what was a long chapter in the lives of the officers.
This exoneration comes too late, and the court of public opinion is relentless. It's cast them as if they were guilty, and today there were over 100 individuals protesting the charges being stayed, even in the face of now clear medical evidence that they were not responsible for Mr. Culver's death.
For those lawyers to say that it's hard for the families and for the RCMP to have to put their lives on hold for these past 7 years to deal with this case is not okay. Imagine having your life have to come to a stop for anything to happen and still nothing happens 7 years later.
Disappointment and heartbreak don't even begin to describe what was felt in that courtroom, as the judge ruled there would be a stay of proceedings due to insufficient evidence to 100% justify the manslaughter charges. However, the family of Dale Culver says they will continue to advocate and fight on his behalf, which could include an independent investigation in the future. Tommy Osborne, CKPG News.
There's something wrong here.
Is that what happened, Mr. St. Marie? Did Dale fuck around and find out? Did you decide to dump Dale? Did you let your anger get the better of you? At around 9 p.m. on July 18, 2017, a 911 call was made reporting a suspicious individual possibly casing vehicles. The person was described as a white male wearing dark clothing, possibly accompanied by an accomplice on a bicycle. Hours later, an RCMP constable responded and spotted Dale Culver, a 35-year-old wet-sweating man riding his bike without a helmet. The constable ordered Culver to stop, but he refused, resulting in a chase, where the officer pursued him first in his SUV and then on foot. The officer eventually pulled Mr. Culver off his bike from behind. A struggle ensued with both parties attempting to throw punches. The officer activated his emergency button, prompting nearby officers to respond immediately. During the altercation, the officer deployed pepper spray into Mr. Culver's face. In response, Mr. Culver rolled onto his stomach and covered his eyes with his hands, making it difficult for the officer to handcuff him. A bystander intervened to help, holding Mr. Culver's shoulder down. Several officers arrived quickly after the emergency call. Constable St. Marie was the first to arrive and pushed the bystander away before punching Mr. Culver at least once in the head. The next officer, Constable Monet, kicked and kneed him in the head and upper body. As more officers arrived, up to 12 in total, 7 surrounded Mr. Culver in an effort to handcuff him. During the struggle, one officer delivered several hammer fists to Mr. Culver's legs, while others twisted his ear and applied pressure points. One officer reported to the IIO investigators that Constable St. Marie sprayed pepper spray into the palm of his gloved hand and then placed the glove over Mr. Culver's mouth. Witnesses said Mr. Culver was possibly moving, rolling, kicking his legs, and pulling his arms away throughout the arrest, though it remains unclear if his behavior was due to resisting arrest or because he was being beaten. After some time, the officers managed to handcuff him using 2 sets of cuffs. Mr. Culver was then assisted to his feet and walked to the back of the police vehicle. Witnesses noted that after being sprayed, Mr. Culver complained of having difficulty breathing. An ambulance was called to assist him. When paramedics arrived, Mr. Culver was initially responsive and stood up outside the vehicle. However, he collapsed and died 29 minutes after the conclusion of his interaction with the police. On July 19, 2017, the Independent Investigation Office of BC was deployed to Prince George to investigate the in-custody death. Josh Patterson, Executive Director of the BC Civil Liberties Association, stated, "We have heard from witnesses that the police told them to delete the cell phone videos that they had taken of the incident. It is a crime for police to instruct witnesses to delete evidence that could be relevant to an investigation. We expect that the Independent Investigation Office will fully investigate all allegations that police officers caused evidence to be destroyed or attempted to do so. We hope that any other witnesses who saw this will come forward. On May 29, 2020, the BC Independent Investigations Office released its final report to the BC Prosecution Service. In summary, Chief Civilian Director RJ McDonald determined that there was reasonable grounds to believe that 2 officers may have committed an offense in relation to the use of force, while 3 others may have committed offenses regarding obstruction of justice. Consequently, the IIO forwarded a report to the BC Prosecution Service for consideration of potential charges. On Wednesday, February 1st, 2023, the BC Prosecution Service announced that charges had been approved against 5 RCMP officers involved in the 2017 arrest, detention, and death of Dale Culver. On April 5th, 2024, the BC Prosecution Services announced a stay in the charges against 2 of the constables, citing conflicting pathology reports and stating they no longer felt that they could prove the charge of manslaughter beyond a reasonable doubt, nor any lesser charges. Unfortunately, the BC Prosecution Services report did nothing but pose more questions. Questions like, what was the officer's name that originally responded to the 911 call of a suspicious person looking into vehicles? Was riding your bike without a helmet a serious enough crime to warrant a physical apprehension, especially when riding without a helmet is not an arrestable offense? Once Dale was detained, and during the subsequent struggle, did the constable warn him that he was about to be pepper sprayed to try to gain compliance? Constable St. Marie sprayed pepper spray on his glove and held it over Dale's mouth. Is this a recommended use of this product, or just a common practice for the BC RCMP? Witnesses said after Dale was pepper sprayed, he started to say that he was having trouble breathing. Why was he not immediately placed in recovery position and held there until the ambulance responded? My final question is this: if the RCMP did nothing wrong, then why did they go around to all the witnesses and threaten them with arrest and confiscation of their cell phones to force them to delete their footage? What were they hiding? We will probably never know what really happened on that summer night, but this incident is a way too common occurrence in Canada. Case after case of young Indigenous men and women die at the hands of the RCMP and other police services every year. As we navigate through 2025, it's imperative that the RCMP operates with transparency and accountability. The public has a right to a national police force that is open and honest, not one that operates in secrecy or misdirection. We must advocate for the establishment of a special prosecution division within the prosecution services, dedicated solely to investigating and prosecuting crimes committed by law enforcement officers. The independent body will ensure that justice prevails, free from bias or influence. Furthermore, implementing a mandate for body cameras on all law enforcement personnel across Canada. It's not just prudent, it is essential for building trust and safeguarding our communities.
There's something wrong here.